Well, the US military says it is reassigning about 200 federalised members of the California National Guard from the Los Angeles area to Portland, Oregon. It's a new tactic to fulfil plans announced by President Donald Trump. A federal court earlier blocked Trump from deploying the Oregon National Guard in that state. The court said there was a lack of evidence that recent protests against the president's immigration crackdown justified sending in troops. Well, meanwhile, Trump has sent 300 Illinois National Guard troops to Chicago to deal with what he calls out-of-control crime. Tensions are rising as ICE agents conduct a citywide sweeps using increasingly aggressive tactics. Normally, state governors manage National Guard deployments, and a federal law restricts the president's ability to use the military at home. For more, let's bring in Claire Finkelstein. She's a professor of law and philosophy at the University of Pennsylvania. Good to see you, Claire. Your organisation, the Centre for Ethics and the Rule of Law, has filed court documents to support California's fight against deployment of National Guard. Does your case built for LA also apply in Chicago?
Exactly, it does, because this is the same case that's being made by the Trump administration and the same case that's being made by all the states that are affected by this. These mobilizations of the National Guard are a violation of the 10th Amendment, as judges now have said in several jurisdictions, including a California federal trial judge and now an Oregon trial judge. It's also a violation of the principle that says you can't use the federal military to engage in law enforcement activities. And that's a very important federal law that also has a kind of constitutional dimension to it, because enforcing that law helps protect constitutional rights. In addition to the 10th Amendment, it helps protect the First Amendment, which is the right of free speech, and the Fourth Amendment to be protected against unreasonable searches and seizures. So there is a violation of federal law going on here that is very, very clear, and the Trump administration is trying to do a workaround of that law, of the Constitution, and of general principles of good military discipline and order, which is extremely problematic in U.S. history.
The governor of Illinois has accused Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem of turning the city into a war zone. Do you genuinely fear an escalation of tension in Chicago?
Yes, of course. This is exactly what happened in California. The ICE arrests and detentions are, of course, extremely unpopular, extremely problematic in their own right. Then what happens is the federal government says that it needs to deploy federal troops in order to protect ICE officers, and this is called the protective power. Now, the protective power itself should not be a basis for sending in federal troops, but that is how the Trump administration has decided to spin this. That is one of the many legal issues at issue in the two court cases and a growing number of court cases that will be filed to address the legality of these deployments. Then what happens, of course, is that the very presence of the National Guard is highly contentious and then tends to spur more demonstrations. And so the presence of these National Guards is kind of the canary in the coal mine. It's a test case, and it is a provocative act, and intentionally so for the Trump administration, given that there is no underlying situation that requires the presence of these National Guard troops.
And as a professor of law and philosophy, you're uniquely qualified for this moment in time, it feels like, in the United States. Where are we right now on the scale of democracy at one end and authoritarianism at the other? Where exactly do you think we are?
So we're tilting very far in the direction of authoritarianism. The use, and in this case, clearly illegal use of federal troops to suppress constitutional rights, to suppress open dissent and First Amendment rights, and to gain control over independent sources of power, which is really what's going on in the tussle with Democratic governors across the country, is a bid to amass power on the part of the federal government. It's almost a deliberate provocation on the part of the Trump administration. Across red states, what we see is an agreement on the part of those governors to allow the Trump administration to use National Guard troops from those states as the Trump administration would wish. So we have one part of the country capitulating to the presidential overreach that's going on, and another part of the country trying to fight it. And the basic dynamic here is about control of the federal government, control of the sources of power, and trying to stamp out resistance wherever it may occur. That is a pretty far notch on the scale of authoritarian government.
Claire, we'll leave it there. Claire Finkelstein, Professor for Law and Philosophy at the University of Pennsylvania. We really appreciate your input. Thanks again.
Thank you.